Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Network Collective's latest webinar on the topic of SD WAN. My name is John Waterhouse, and I'm CEO of the Network Collective, and I'll be your host for the next 20 minutes. As I'm sure everyone joining knows, TNC is the UK's largest independent telecom strategy and sourcing consultancy. We support over 240 major UK multinational companies to help them get the best possible commercial, technical, operational and contractual results from their network and telecom solutions. So joining me today is our CTO, Craig Northveth. Craig, would you like to say hello to our listeners?
Yes, good morning, John. Hello, everybody on the call.
So before we get stuck into the meat of the webinar, just a couple of housekeeping points quickly. So first of all, we're going to be very strict on sticking to the 20-minute timetable. We know everyone listening has got busy days, so we're going to get to the meat of it and get through it as quickly as possible. Everybody will get a copy of the slides sent after the webinar, and we will try and respond to any questions as we go. And again at the end, but any questions we don't have time to answer, we will respond to on email afterwards. So please do send your questions in as we go. So the purpose of today's webinar is to put the whole topic of SD-WAN under the microscope. So as I'm sure everyone listening knows, SD is the biggest buzzword in telecoms right now. It seems it is the number one topic everyone wants to talk about. A lot of people think that SD is the next big thing. Some people even think SD is already a big thing, but certainly that it's the next big thing. I've been reading all sorts of articles recently that SD is going to replace MPLS, SD is the WAN technology of the future, etc., etc. So a lot of hype, a lot of buzz. I'm sure everyone listening today has had 1,000 vendors on the phone, grabbing them at trade shows, emailing them, etc., to pitch SD-WAN. So as a vendor-independent, solution-independent consultancy, we thought TNC is extremely well placed to host this webinar today and really ask the question, well, what is the reality of SD? What is it? Why is it of interest? And critically, is anyone actually buying it? Forget what the vendors say about that everyone should buy it. Is anyone actually buying it? And of course, most importantly, should you be buying it? So, Craig, I can see that your first slide is talking about changing demands on the network. Is that what's driving interest in SD?
Yeah, so I wanted to start today, John, by really setting the scene before we delve into the SD-WAN technology, some of the benefits and challenges around SD-WAN. Really kind of understand why the market is changing, why people think that SD-WAN is the next big thing, and why there's so much interest going on at the minute. So we're kind of looking at what has changed, what are the key demands that are on the network today, and why and how potentially could SD-WAN address some of these demands. So if we kind of quickly run around this slide. Cloud first at the top there. So almost every single organization that we talk to now is either considering or has migrated some services to the cloud, whether that's the SaaS, whether it's infrastructure as a service, whether it's platform as a service. Cloud is a big thing which is now fully mainstream across many organizations. In terms of why that's important to SD-WAN, we'll come on and talk around things around virtualization of some SD-WAN appliances. We'll talk about how SD-WAN can optimize connectivity to the cloud, and then why that's kind of forming a big picture from an overall network point of view. The second point in there is around agility. So again, many organizations we speak to now are delivering new types of agile methodologies from an application point of view. They want things to be done quicker. They want to be able to effectively manage their overall IT infrastructure far more agile than what they ever have done in the past. Increased bandwidth. So I think along with moving more things to the cloud, moving more services from an agile delivery point of view, and delivering more applications, everything we're seeing at the minute, most organizations are seeing an increased demand for bandwidth, whether that's internet bandwidth, whether that's MPLS bandwidth, whether it's wireless type bandwidth. Almost all organisations are seeing that increase. If we kind of quickly run through the other areas here in terms of demand, so we've got application visibility. So for a long time now, visibility has primarily been driven by things like network visibility, round trip time, packet loss, jitter, that kind of stuff. There's now a bigger interest in understanding how applications are performing on the network, how end user performance is on the network, how that can be effectively used to dynamically change the routing on the network. So application visibility and control aspects of SD WAN are a key demand that we've seen coming through from many of our customers. Rapid deployment's another one. So you know, the kind of ability to expedite delivery lead times from traditional types of services such as MPLS and even internet services by using more rapid deployment technologies, using cellular, 3G, 4G, and then obviously onto 5G when that becomes available. But then the ability that SD WAN brings to quickly and rapidly deploy an overlay service, that's again another key demand that we're seeing through from many of our customers. And the final one is security. Again, a big area. The threat landscape within IT is continually evolving, increasing. There is a demand to improve identification and mitigation of these threats through some of the SD WAN technologies that we're going to talk about today.
Okay, so
sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say. So clearly, lots of changing demands on the network. So potentially giving rise to a requirement for SD. So okay, baseline noted. What is SD? What are the key principles underpinning it?
So the key principles, so what we're showing on this slide here, if we just take a look at the diagram first, a very, very simplistic view of the SD-WAN concept. So what we're showing in this diagram effectively is one single remote site or a branch site and a data center, so kind of traditional type of setup. What we've got in the as a transport within this diagram effectively is two different networks. We've got a private IP network, such as an MPLS type platform, and we've got a public internet network. What we can see here effectively is two paths have been created between the remote site and the data center, with critical traffic being routed across the private network, the optimized network, if you like, the one that's got SLAs, quality service across there. So a critical application may be voice or video, or a critical line of business application. And then across the internet transport, we've got non-critical traffic. So effectively what we're doing here is utilizing different transport mechanisms to deliver a single dynamic connection between a remote site or branch and a data center. That can also extend out to the cloud as well, to say an Azure or an AWS. So at a very basic level, that's the SD-WAN concept. If we start looking around the diagram at some of the key capabilities of SD-WAN, at the top left there we've got transport agnostic. So this is a key advantage of SD-WAN, in that you no longer are bound to a single type of technology from a single provider. SD-WAN effectively is a virtual overlay network which can operate across any type of transport, whether that be MPLS, VPLS, internet, point-to-point connections, mobile, cellular type connections. It doesn't really care about what the underlying access is, as long as it can create a secure connection from one point to another. Adding on to that, so assuming we take this diagram as an example, we've got two paths there, one via the private network and one via the internet network. Dynamic path control and performance-based routing effectively allows, or is an intelligent capability which allows the remote site or branch to select the best path, the type of traffic that it's trying to route. If it's critical, it's identified as critical, and it will be dynamically routed across the best path, which in this case would be the MPLS route. If it's non-critical, such as web services, someone's surfing YouTube or something like that, or Facebook, it'll be deemed as non-critical and routed across a internet connection, which potentially could be low cost. The performance-based routing aspect of this is where some of the clever intelligence comes in around understanding what upstream performance looks like. If there's any congestion, if there's bottlenecks within the network, you can dynamically change the route of that traffic based on a set policy. So you are automatically changing traffic profiles and behaviours based on the upstream performance of either the private network or the internet network, or even potentially the cellular network.
Okay.
The final one on the top right there then is network optimization. So not all SD-WAN products have this bundled in. Sometimes it's a license extra, sometimes it's not included at all, sometimes it's bundled in. But this is the kind of traditional network acceleration type capability that we've seen from the likes of Riverbed and Silver Peak for many years. That has also been bundled into some SD-WAN products to deliver a kind of full portfolio of network performance.
Okay.
As we
Craig,
go down,
I'm just a bit conscious of time. So
yeah,
you see lots of great things that SD can do. I'm conscious in the remaining 10 minutes we really need to get into what people are actually using it for, or indeed are they actually using it. So I'm just going to jump us on to the sort of key benefits. So picking up on what you were just talking about, the ability to use a sort of any type of circuit to connect. I think particularly people's ears will prick up at the idea of using kind of low cost network access. So not necessarily having to buy expensive MPLS type connectivity, but being able to bring in lower cost connectivity. You're saying this is a benefit of SD. Do we see people actually doing that?
So yes and no. I'll go for the quick answer. So we see it being more common in terms of multinational organisations, some of which will probably already have some level of hybrid model where it's a relatively static IPsec type internet connection, which they use as maybe a backup for their MPLS. Where we're seeing SD-WAN being advantageous for them types of organisations is it becomes much more dynamic, so they can effectively deliver the lower cost internet service and use it as more than a backup. So the non-critical traffic, they're offloading much more of that onto the lower cost, higher bandwidth, localized internet services. We're not seeing it as much in the domestic market, primarily because of some of the complexities around managing it, the operating model around it, and the fact that there's not a huge commercial benefit within the domestic market between MPLS and internet services, unless you go down a kind of best-of-breed multi-vendor route.
So that's a really interesting point, because I think one of the things which I've certainly had pitched to me by SD vendors, or vendors talking about SD, is SD is cheaper. Mm-hmm. Now I get why a hybrid network is cheaper than a pure MPLS network, but people are running hybrid networks today without SD. So is the reality today that you don't need SD to save money on MPLS? Hybrid will already do that. SD is adding functionality to hybrid to make it higher performing and easier to manage.
In summary, it's exactly that, John. Yes. So it is the ease of management. It's some of the advantages that we talked about in the previous slides around central policy management, orchestration of the network, rapid deployment, zero-touch provision. These are the things that make a hybrid deployment far easier to manage than a kind of manual IPsec overlay type management that you've got to do on a per site basis, and policy can get out of line and lots of issues can occur. It also allows, maybe more dynamic access to cloud platforms and better utilization of that internet service. I think if we just nudge on to the next slide and we talk about some of the challenges with that, one of the biggest things that we see as a challenge is actually the sourcing and ownership, and I guess the overall operating model of this. So where you're looking to effectively deliver them types of cost savings that are marketed from most of these SD-WAN providers, you've got to take a bit of a best of breed or low cost approach to actually sourcing the physical access. So whether that's MPLS or internet or whatever access method it may be. Now, for a multinational, that could be very, very complex. It could mean that you're effectively sourcing local internet services in every single market, in every single country that you operate in. The reality of that is that the contracts that you'll have for them services will likely be relatively poor. The vendor management associated with managing all them service providers, both from a sourcing perspective and also an in-life perspective, will be very difficult because of things like language barriers and again, back to poor contracts and relatively standard SLAs. So there's a very, very big challenge around being able to deliver SD WAN the way it's marketed. So yes, absolutely, you can get a single overlay service for all these providers, but the underlying infrastructure you still need to procure, you still need to manage, and you still need to operate on a day-to-day basis.
So just sort of summarising that point, because I think that what you've just gone through is absolutely critical. I think everyone listening is going to these are going to be the sorts of issues they're going to be exploring in their own reviews of SD. Primarily, what we're saying is the cost saving that's touted for SD is predominantly coming by switching out, as it were, expensive MPLS bandwidth for lower cost internet bandwidth, potentially, because, as you said, domestically, that trade-off probably doesn't actually exist. That, you know, in the UK, internet bandwidth is really much cheaper than MPLS bandwidth, so actually that trade-off might not even exist in the first place. On a multinational basis, for sure it does. You know, if you're putting a 10 gig link into Dubai, it's going to be an awful lot cheaper buying that as an internet connection than an MPLS connection. Yeah. But then you've got a very complicated operational situation where you've potentially, you're contracting locally. You've then got language barriers, currency. You've got differential contracts everywhere, different SLAs everywhere. Whilst the SD will help you stitch that together technically, it's not actually going to make any difference to you operationally, right? It's not going to phone up the local ISP in Dubai on your behalf and say, I've got a fault.
No, it's not. And I think, you know, we've had this conversation before, John, many times. For some organisations, that may not be a problem. That may be the current model if they've already got some localised internet services in a hybrid model. That might not be too scary. But for organisations who are currently running a pure MPLS from a single provider or maybe 3 or 4 providers on a regional basis, moving to that model is very difficult and quite scary from a vendor management and support or service point of view. So although you do get the single view of the network and you get it all wrapped up and orchestrated from a single source, a single platform, the underlying pieces to the infrastructure are nowhere near as good as what you would effectively get on a single provider MPLS from an SLA and commercial and contractual point of view.
Now, the alternative view of that, of course, is there is a second SD model, is there not, where the traditional big global WAN vendors, I'm talking about the AT&Ts, BTs, Verizons, OBS, etc., they are building and deploying their own SD capability, often partnered with SD specialists, so people like VeloCloud or Viptela or whatever. That's another way that our listeners could be looking at accessing SD. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So within the last 12 months, probably, all the big providers, so the ones that are in the kind of top right quadrant of Gather's Magic Quadrant, they have all pretty much either developed their own or partnered with a software-defined WAN vendor to deliver that capability. Some are going further than the others. So some are providing effectively off-the-shelf services and delivering it as a kind of enterprise solution. Others are embedding it within their own internal networks and delivering SD-WAN capability end-to-end. So some of the more smaller, I guess, innovative service providers will probably start looking at offering things like bandwidth on demand, pay-per-use kind of global transit type connectivity using their SD capability, but that's all definitely still in development. It's not fully productized yet. The ones that have productized it are limited in terms of their skill capability to deliver. We've seen a few pilots of different types of vendor technology fail at this point due to, you know, the complexity of it. So that, you know, the things around zero-touch deployment and agile delivery, that's definitely not the case in all of the vendors out there at the minute. So there's you know, I guess in summary, it's not a very mature market yet. It's still mature, and it's maturing at pace, and the big telcos are definitely trying to get on board and deliver it and productize it out to the customer base. But it still needs to grow a little bit in maturity before the take-up significantly increases, I think.
So you've hit on the $1 million question there, Craig, and in fact for many of our listeners, probably a lot more than $1 million. It's 20 past 11, so this is going to have to be the sort of 1 minute answer. But the key question, so we've touched, I think, very nicely on what it is, why it might be of interest, but also what is the reality. Given the complexity, given the immaturity, given the challenges, is it fair to say we're not seeing a lot of this actually being bought right here, right now? We're seeing a lot of tire kicking and a lot of pilots and a lot of thought processes around SD, but we're not actually seeing a lot of ink going on paper for contracts to say, yes, please, I'm now deploying SD. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. So I think in the kind of procurement life cycle, if you like, many organisations it's sitting within the consider tower at the minute. It's definitely part of lots of organisation strategies because of the capabilities that it delivers. But yeah, we're not seeing anybody sign significant contracts for this type of technology yet. But you know, it is progressing, it is improving, it is maturing, and as more people consider it and the market gets much more mature, it will definitely start appearing, particularly in multinationals. Domestic, I'm still struggling to see the value in it just yet, but I think, you know, that may develop.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. And presumably the drivers which are getting people thinking about this, they are not going away. If anything,
No.
They are becoming more and more important. Bandwidth demand, application performance demand, you know, these things are you know, cloud utilization. There's only one direction of travel with these drivers, right?
Yeah, absolutely right. And just really kind of quickly, and just to kind of back up the thinking around the domestic market, and we've said this many times before in other webinars, this kind of, the telcos are almost threatened by some of this stuff, by, you know, moving away from their MPLS networks to internet networks. So within the domestic market, what the telcos continue seem to be doing is just reducing the price for MPLS type services, for the higher bandwidth services. So when you get to, and again, we've got it on that slide there, when you actually sit down and do the business case creation and you look at, well, could we just stay with what we've got but improve that, that often prices in as well as what an SD WAN solution will do. So the telcos are playing a bit of a game as well to make sure that they retain their revenues.
Well, and this is something which we've seen. I mean, I think this is a known aspect of a technology life cycle, isn't it? When we saw, I remember, for example, this being a big element in IP voice take-up, that the technology was there a long time before uptake really kicked in, because, you know, the vendors had created and sunk huge investment into their traditional voice platforms. They might as well keep operating them and keep cutting the price and keep pushing back the business case for the new technology. So I think it's a really good point to say we you know, that's a natural response for the vendors.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, for me, you know, one of the questions you asked at the start is this an MPLS killer? Is this a kind of private network killer? I don't think it is at the minute. I think there's still, many organisations still have a necessity for good private quality networks, which provide the SLAs and the contracted to deliver quality of service and high levels of performance. I don't think that's going to go away. I think SD WAN initially is going to be a complementary service which delivers much more dynamic network environment, and is kind of easy to manage, potentially easy to integrate in the future, and potentially orchestrate with other IT orchestration platforms. But it's slow progress, I guess, is my conclusion.
Craig, we are past our 20 minutes, so I thank you very much for your time. Very interesting, and I think that was a great summary at the end. So I'm sure on behalf of all the listeners, thank you very much for your thoughts and insights, and thank you to our listeners for joining us today. Hopefully that was interesting and useful. Sorry we haven't got to the questions, but we've had lots in, and we will respond to those on email later today. And yeah, look forward to speaking with you all on our next webinar in the coming weeks. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.